Hello and welcome to today's Wholehearted Living podcast episode with your host Debs Thorpe, and today we are delving into the topic of triggers. So this is a topic that I wanted to touch on because it's become one of those buzzwords that everyone now seems to say is, as they go through life, as they go throughout the day, that they are being triggered, and lots of different things are triggering lots of people. And I'm very conscious, I think, of coming from the counselling psychology background. We're going back almost 20 years now for me, that a lot of the words that have become commonplace in our language carried very specific meanings from a therapeutic context years ago. And, I think it's amazing that there's more information out there now, and there's lots of, it's a lot more open and people are understanding a lot more concepts now. I'm also very aware that it can mean that terms can get thrown around quite a lot and quite frivolously sometimes when, actually when someone talks about being triggered, they might actually be referring to just an emotional response, right? For me, from my background, triggered is where you are having your nervous system is having a response to something that is happening now, that is triggering something from your past, whether you consciously are aware of it or it's something that's going on subconsciously, that in that moment you don't understand, you feel like you don't have any control over it. So for me, it carries quite a significant kind of meaning versus that person has said something or acted in a way and I don't like it. Okay. So I just wanted to start off by clarifying that. I also was taught an amazing way of dealing with triggers years ago in my NLP training. And so I really want to share this with you because I think it changes the context, it changes our experience and response to triggers, and it allows us to use them as points of growth and healing. And if everyone could work with triggers in this way, the world would change overnight, no doubt about it. So when we talk about being triggered, whatever emotional depth we're experiencing that in that moment, I want you to see the trigger as an invitation. Okay. In that moment, that trigger, so by that I'm referring to it, something happening, somebody saying something, a situation happening, and you feeling something in your body, physically or an emotional response or something that you maybe don't understand or is triggering something from your past in that moment. And what we tend to do is get caught up in the reaction of that. Okay, so it's like, that person has done something, they've said something, we're feeling that trigger of that old emotional response, residue, whatever it is that's going on in our body in that moment. And then we immediately operate from that place. Now, that place might not be something that we totally understand. It's just that's what we're in that moment. And so, like with most things, when it comes to emotions, when it comes to what is going on internally, we have to slow it down. Okay. And so a really good practice when we are experiencing a trigger is to take a breath and see that trigger is an invitation to an unhealed part of ourselves, or to a wound that still requires some healing. And when we do that, it allows us to experience that trigger as something that fundamentally is empowering for us. So I could cite many, many examples of this, and I'm sure you've got lots of examples in your own life as well. And I'm going to give you one that seemingly is quite frivolous, that kind of shows this working out quite well. So I was the unexpected third child to my parents. I came along 14 years after my middle sister, and I was the third of all girls. So I think my dad would have loved a boy. I was quite a tomboy growing up. I would be helping him in the garage with cars and labouring on for him. He was a plasterer, so I'd go and labour on for him at a weekend. And I was quite a tomboy growing up, and really was instilled with a very, very strong work ethic and a real stubbornness as a kid, in as much as no one was ever going to tell me I couldn't do something when it came to like achieving something, or particularly something physical. Okay, I went to Air Cadets from the age of 13, and there was no way that a boy was ever going to do something that I couldn't do. And physically, that whole mentality meant that I was very strong at that age. I was leg pressing more than any lad in the school. Like, it was such a strong driver and a strong motivator. So I had this from a very, very young age, and actually, for the most part served me really well, because it meant that I really did push myself, and I really did have some amazing achievements and experiences physically. So I have such fondness for that part of me. However, I didn't realise that this was something that could be maybe a little bit toxic or a little bit unbalanced, until I moved into the place that I lived in for many, many years in Torquay. And our next door neighbour is absolutely brilliant. Like, such a lovely guy, such a lovely family that live next door. And I remember when we were first moving in and getting things together, and obviously taking lots of furniture in and stuff, he would straight away be there being like, "No, Debbie, don't you be lifting anything, don't you be hurting yourself, I'll do that, I'll sort that." Well, that's a really nice thing to do, first and foremost. That's very, very kind and generous of someone. That, in the beginning, used to trigger me so hugely. Like, I would get so angry. Not to him. I was way too much of a people pleaser back then. I would go, "Oh, thank you so much. You do what you need to do." But internally, I was raging. Like, how dare he think that he is stronger than me? How dare he think that I can't do this? Who does he think that I am? I'm some weak female that can't be lifting this thing. Like, honestly, the anger was just insane. And of course, I'm creating that story, right? I might, that initial trigger of, this, I feel angry in this moment. I've then gone on to create this whole story about what that means, just to feed the anger. And, this happened quite a lot. you know, particularly in the beginning, you know, you're moving stuff in, things are being delivered, you know, like there was quite a few opportunities where this would happen. And I think at the heart of all of this was somehow him having the thought or the idea that I was like this weak, physically weak female who couldn't manage it. And I was like, I will not tolerate somebody having that opinion of me. Like I somehow had some way of controlling it. And what happened was when I allowed myself to actually sit with this trigger and go, okay, come on, like what's really going on here? Because you can't keep being, you can't keep getting this angry every time someone offers to do something for you. And when I sat with this as an invitation, I was able to really get in touch with that child in me that almost felt like, not that I felt I had to be something I wasn't growing up, but I was very, very aware that I didn't want to be viewed as like a weak little girl who couldn't do anything. You know, on some level, of course, I was rewarded for being the strong one, the one who could do everything. Not only does it feel good, but of course it gets rewarded from those around you as well. So, you know, there was like this really ferocious, stubborn little girl inside of me that was so active in that moment. And so what this allowed me to do when I got curious with this trigger and invited it to kind of show me where I could heal, was I was able to sit down with my inner child, so with that child self, and I was able to sit down with her as the adult I am now and go, you know, I have so much love for you. You are like, that fire that you have inside of you is so inspiring and it's so amazing. But you don't always have to be the one that does it all. You don't have anything to prove to anybody. I know how strong you are. I know how amazing you are. You have got nothing to prove here. And, you know, it really doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. Like, you and I know, okay, and that's enough. So if somebody wants to help, if somebody wants to think a certain way about you, that's okay. Like, let them tell their own story. You know, we don't want to be getting all caught up in the drama of that, of the emotions of that. Like, let them have their story. We know the truth, it's okay. And so when I was able to sit down with that child and have that conversation, there was something within me that I felt click, that just was like, oh, okay, so if someone wants to help or someone wants to, maybe they've got their own story going on, right, of like, that's what men do. You know, we're talking generational things here as well, of like, maybe, you know, my neighbour had his own story of, well, I can't let, it's not right for me to allow a woman to lift something heavy when I should be doing that because I'm the man, right? Maybe they've got their own story going on. We don't know. So all I can do is learn the lesson from my own trigger and allow it to reveal the part of me that needs just a little bit of healing or a little bit of attention in that moment. So when I was able to have that conversation with my own inner child, something really amazing happened. It suddenly gave me such huge freedom in being able to accept help from other people. So, you know, whenever my neighbour jumped in to take something off me, if I was lifting something or carrying something, that there was no longer any trigger there. There was no longer any anger. I was able to go, oh, thank you so much for your help. That's really appreciated. And it was almost like I could imagine in that moment my inner child next to me, as winking at each other, going, but we know we could carry it, right? Like, we know. And that was enough. And I was actually able to be almost a bit playful with the experience. And, that part of me is like, I love that part of me still. I love that I am physically pretty strong, and I will put my hands on most things. Like, I love that about myself. And I write about this in the blog post of where I go on to run an ultra marathon. So I run 30 miles within my first 6 weeks of running. And I talk about the process of reconnecting with the inner Debbie, who just loves being up against it, who loves that physical push and that challenge. And I've learnt to honour her in my life now as an adult by going and doing some amazing running challenges and some physical challenges. So, like, I've learnt to harness that within myself now in a way that doesn't need to be triggered. So that's one example of experiencing a trigger that at the time, I mean, I look back on it now and I can laugh and I can smile at it, and I can have so much compassion for the version of me that got so angry at the thought of someone else thinking I was too weak, and how rather than getting stuck in the anger and allowing that to play out and create this whole story around what that meant, being able to see that anger as an invitation to an unhealed part of me, or a part of me that needed to have a say in that moment, and that leading to this whole amazing conversation with my younger self, with my inner child, that led to such freedom. So that's what really this is all about. Seeing those triggers as invitations, because once that trigger, once that wound has been healed, has been acknowledged, there won't be the trigger anymore. It just won't exist. You can put yourself into the same situation and not have the same emotional response. So that's what I mean about, if we were to all work with triggers in this way, the world would change overnight, because we'd suddenly be able to go to the part of ourselves that was triggered in that moment, do that inner work of healing, and then that trigger has no purpose anymore. Doesn't need to be there, because you've got the message. So that's my invitation for you today, is typically we'll experience a trigger emotionally in the beginning, right? So we'll have some kind of automatic emotional response, whether that's hurt, anger, pain, frustration. That then is your cue to take a breath and go, okay, what does this anger want me to know? What's it trying to teach me? Where in my life have I felt like this before? What if I was to see this situation differently? What if the story I'm currently telling myself about this situation is not true? Allow yourself to think beyond it. Allow yourself to connect. And, typically speaking, it will go back. It will go back into something in childhood, or some big emotional experience you've had at some point. So just allow yourself to go back there and have a conversation. Be curious. Your body, your system knows what it needs in order to heal. We just have to be open enough to hear it. So there's my invitation for you today. See your triggers as invitations. They are an invitation to deeper healing so that you can have a much more freedom-filled experience of this life. And I really look forward to hearing your comments about this and your experience of triggers and healing triggers. Okay, until next time, bye for now.